you. Well, first of all, thank you for joining us for this press conference on the 2020-2021 school year reopening protocols. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Jamie Ries. I work in District Communications for San Diego Unified. I am filling in for our Director of Communications, Maureen McGee, and facilitating today's press conference. I would like to go over the order of speakers. First, we will kick it off with Superintendent Cindy Marten. She will then be followed by Dr. Howard Terrace, our District Pediatrician. Following Dr. Terrace will be our Board of Education President, Dr. John Lee Evans. Following Dr. Evans will be our Board of Education Vice President, Richard Barrera. Following Richard Barrera will be our San Diego Education Association President, Kisha Borden. Following Kisha Borden will be Council of PTAs former President, Derick Boerner.
Good afternoon to everybody who's joined us this afternoon. I want to thank you for being here, and I'm really proud of the work that we're about to share. Not only does this work represent the best of San Diego Unified, but I actually believe it represents the best of San Diego, of our entire city. Because the way we are in San Diego is we take care of one another, we look out for one another, we make smart decisions. I would just like to say how grateful we are for some really outstanding support that we have received as a school district by some of our top researchers in their field. That's who we have here in San Diego, and we've received outstanding, tremendous support from them. And so I think the best way to start is to introduce one of those leaders of this effort, Dr. Howard Terrace from UC San Diego, and he's also San Diego Unified's District Pediatrician. Best to hear from him. I'm proud to introduce everyone, if you haven't met him already, to Dr. Howard Terrace. Thank you, Dr. Terrace.
Well, thank you very much for that introduction. And it's been great being a part of the district and of UCSD for many years. And it was great to include my colleagues from UCSD into matters that are not academic, but actually in practice in a real live setting. My UCSD colleagues, and you'll get their names, were from infectious diseases, from virology, from epidemiology, and from various, from chemistry, and from various different backgrounds. And they don't all think the same way. They didn't all write their responses in exactly the same opinion, but there was general agreements for all the critical things, and which was very nice. And we were able to really get our head around some issues that were probably the most perplexing for us to move from, the online learning to the in-school learning. And so that was very good. And when we think about science and how it applies to practical application in our school districts, we have to remember that whatever our experts say today, it may change in 3 weeks. Some things that we thought were not that critical could become more critical. And some things that we think of as being very important now, we may be able to relax somewhat. And I would have to say that in the past month, that kind of shift has already happened. And this expert panel really brought that to light. And I'll just give 2 examples because our report and the press release give a lot more detail. But one is that, we really should not be opening all of our schools fully the way other countries have done until what is going on in the community as far as disease incidents and the way it's traced is also like it is in many other countries that have been successful with opening their schools. We're not a microcosm of the community in total, but we are a microcosm of the community when it comes to how much disease you will expect anywhere out there and what you will expect in the schools. And so if you want to contain what's going on in the schools, that is going to have an effect. And that includes not only how prevalent the disease is out there, but also where is our public health system in getting testing and getting contact tracing? Where are they in that process everywhere? Because that will also apply to our schools and make them safer when the community has kind of caught up to where we would like to be. The second difference that I think that science has really, paved the way is with disinfecting. All of us agree that continuing with daily intense disinfecting, providing hand sanitizers and providing hand washing stations is important. But the relative importance of what you touch and how touching that can lead to disease has really diminished in comparison to what you breathe. And where we're going to be putting a lot of our resources and our very stringent rules is in changing what anybody is a member of our school community is going to be breathing when they come onto a school site. And that is droplets that we hear come from our mouths. That is tiny little aerosols that may float in the air that may have infectious material in them. It's those things that we are going to put a lot of effort into mitigating. And that means that masks or face coverings or whatever you want to call them are more critical now than we'd ever thought before. The ventilation in a room, indoors, shouldn't just be, oh yeah, well, they have an air conditioning unit, or oh, the window's open. We really have to check and make sure that the ventilation is very good, and that if we are using an HVAC, an air conditioning or heating system, that our filters are really very good. And we're going to be looking at those sorts of things. As much as can be done outside will be done outside, because there's the best ventilation possible. So it's that kind of advice from this committee that is really actually changed and formed the policy that we're coming up with now for when schools reopen. So I wanted to say that now, and I'm proud of at least where we think we are now. Between now and when we really do reopen, if there's a change in science, there could be a change in or a tweaking a little bit of some of these guidances as well. I would like to introduce next, Dr. John Evans. As many of you know, because you've heard from before, he is the president of the school board for San Diego Unified School District.
Thank you very much, Dr. Terrace, and for all the great work you've been doing for us. Everyone is anxious about this, parents, teachers, students, and we really want the public to know that when we reopen, we're going to reopen the right way. We're going to do it slowly and carefully. We've seen the mistakes that have been made other places with other venues where they suddenly opened and then had to reclose because they made an arbitrary decision that wasn't really based on science. When we decided to close in March, we were one of the first that decided to close because we knew that would be the safest thing to do. And whenever we reopen, we're also going to make sure we're doing it the safest possible way. The problem we've had, and on the board, and the superintendent, everybody has been, there are so many guidelines throughout the country, from the CDC, the state, the county, World Health Organization. And so that's why we empaneled this group of UCSD experts to really come up with some clear guidance on what would be the safest way for us to reopen our schools and at what pace. And I think the beauty of this is that we have set one of the highest standards for any district in the country, because we are looking at the state guidelines and the county guidelines, which are not exactly the same, but we're including both of them in our decision about reopening. And obviously there's some key indicators that people can watch for. There are many indicators, but particularly the case rate in the community, community outbreaks on one side, and then the other side having to do with testing and tracing, the positivity rate, and all of that. We also, Dr. Terrace worked with the group in terms of the mitigation, and this is extremely important for us in terms of what's going to take place when our schools actually do reopen. One of the issues was masks, that masks are first and foremost absolutely necessary. As Dr. Terrace mentioned, the whole issue about ventilation, which has to do with air conditioning, it has to do with special filters, it has to do with windows, use of outdoor space, social distancing, and again, taking that social distancing and looking at it in a nuanced way in terms of what is realistic, as well as sanitizing and personal hygiene. So we realized that we're going to start the school year online, but we also realized that there are some students for whom it's very difficult. One example would be homeless students, and we have to look at how we can best serve those students in person and given the current circumstances. But overall, what people need to know is we're not going to just flip some switch at any point. Even schools that are saying, okay, we're going to stay closed for this amount of time, do not have an idea of what the conditions are going to be once they have the date they have set for reopening. So we're going to do this in phases. We'll do it with small groups, with particular types of students and so forth, so that it's done in a very safe way. But people need to know that for the meantime, we have an online learning program, and we've developed this with parents and teachers and students in mind. And that program is going to be available indefinitely, even when the students are back in the classroom. And I know one question everybody's going to ask is, well, what is the timeline? And what people need to do is you can watch some of these outside metrics, what's going on in the community, but you need to know that in the school district, we're going to be preparing all along for the eventual return to the classroom. We're not going to be caught flat-footed. We're going to be fully prepared when that happens. And I think recently, one of the UCSD experts, Dr. Prather, was commenting that if people are in the community are really careful and following all of these guidelines for control of the virus in August and September, that increases the chances of us being able to open the schools eventually. And just one more thing I wanted to say, which was rather inspiring to me, and I know we're going to hear later from a teacher and a parent, but there was a second grade teacher from Encanto Elementary who was who was quoted in Time magazine in an article about what's going on in the schools. This Barbara Kukacek was her name, and she talked about the difficulties and the challenges of starting online in the spring. But one thing she did was work very closely with the parents and kept in very close contact with them, even on the phone, to make sure that the students were getting what they needed. And one thing she said was she was disappointed when she found out that we weren't going to be reopening the classrooms in the fall, but she also felt that it was the right and the safest thing to do. So what she's been doing in the meantime is talking to her parents and students over the summer, having weekly reading groups and getting them prepared to start the online learning in the fall. And her whole message was, we're all in this together. We're all working on this together. And I think that sets an example for all of us in the district. So now I would like to introduce my fellow board member who has been working on this very much, Vice President Richard Barrera.
Thank you, President Evans. And yeah, I think President Evans just really summarized all of the considerations, that we've been grappling with, and why it's been so critical that Dr. Terrace and the team from UCSD has been able to come with very clear guidelines. Just 2 points that I would probably want to, back up what President Evans just talked about. Number one, we are extremely aware and extremely concerned about the situation facing the vast majority of our students and our families by being out of school, for this long period of time. We closed the schools in the middle of March, and it's very obvious that when we talk about the standards that the scientists are recommending we apply, and then we talk about the slow phased reopening approach that's also based on recommendations from the scientists, it will be a matter of months, not weeks, not days, that we can anticipate the majority of our students continuing to be working at home in online learning. And I can tell you from, I represent the part of the district that has, schools where 100% of the students qualify for free and reduced lunch, and high percentages of English learners and high percentages of students with special needs. And we are very aware of the not just the academic challenges, but the social, emotional, mental health challenges that our students are facing. And part of the reason why we have to be so careful about going forward with our approach to reopening is, number one, these are also the communities that often have very high incidences of spread of the virus. These are communities where we have people, parents, who are going to work out of necessity, and even the availability of testing for for folks in our communities that may even be symptomatic is inadequate right now. And so what we need to be doing as a school district is our part to control, slow down the spread of this virus so that in fact we can return our students to school where they need to be. But as Dr. Terrace began by pointing out, even though we're setting very high standards, maybe the highest standards that we've seen so far any place in the country for what we need to see both in terms of the spread of the virus in the community and the mitigation factors that need to be in place at schools, even though those are extremely high standards, they are nowhere near the conditions in terms of spread of the virus that are in place in many countries that have begun to bring students back to school. So if we think about red, yellow, and green zones as a way, of getting our heads around this, obviously where we're at in our community right now in San Diego is we are in a red zone. We are nowhere near being able to meet the conditions that are necessary to even begin our slow phased reopening. And what we're trying to do is get to the point that we are in a yellow zone, right? That's our goal, to go from a red zone to a yellow zone. But even when we get there, even when these standards for reopening have been met, we are nowhere near the green zone that we see in many other countries. And that means that we have to be extremely careful and extremely cautious in how we move forward, because we don't have examples of communities that have a high degree of spread of the virus that have returned students to school. We're starting to see some of those examples around the country. They are troubling. The information that we're getting back about what has been happening is very concerning. And so when we proceed with caution in this yellow zone, it's because we are trying to avoid major mistakes that would make it harder and increase the amount of time that's required to get our students back to school where they belong. And I guess one other factor that I just have to, we all have to continue to be aware of is these mitigation factors that the scientists are pointing out that are necessary in order for us to, talk about bringing students back to school. They are expensive and they cost more money than, the money that schools are budgeted for. And the only place that we're going to see the resources that are necessary to put our mitigation factors fully into place, the only place that can provide those resources is the federal government. And unfortunately, we see that the federal government has failed to act, is continuing to fail to act, and we don't see, light on the horizon for the federal government actually meeting its responsibility to bring the resources to schools that will be necessary to fully implement these mitigation factors. So we are in a precarious situation. We will be. We're dependent, as President Evans talked about, on all of us in the community doing our part to comply with the mask requirements, to comply with the social distancing requirements, to slow the spread of this virus down. And we are also dependent on leaders in Washington, D.C. to do their part to bring the resources that are necessary in order for us to move forward. So it's a precarious situation that we will continue to be in for some time. And I'd like to please invite the president of the San Diego Education Association, who's been working so closely on all of these issues with the scientists, with the district, and with your educators that are out there on the front lines, and that is Kisha Borden.
Thank you so much. So I first want to share that our educators, the members of SDEA, nurses, counselors, school psychs, and many more, desperately want to be back in the classroom with their students. But they also want to be able to come back to work in a safe environment that does not put those educators and their families at risk or at danger. And there are other staff members in our schools also to consider. So I'm very happy that we were able to partner with the experts from UCSD, who are not just local experts, but they are nationally recognized experts in their field. So I'm very happy that we were able to work with that panel to make sure that, as people have said before, that we're doing this in the right way. So as I've said before, we have to rely on science to determine what safety protocols have to be in place for schools to reopen. And some of the other folks have mentioned it, Dr. Terrace, we have to look at personal protective equipment. Are masks adequate? Who are masks adequate for? Do certain folks need additional PPE? Distancing, ventilation is huge. As I've said before, our schools are so different. We're such a huge district that there are many school sites that don't have windows, that have windows that share air conditioning, that have their individual air conditioning. So ventilation is a huge issue and a very important issue to mitigating the spread of the virus. And then the sanitizing and disinfecting is another very important issue. And so I'm very happy that we have received those guidelines from the panel of health experts. So I also want to talk about online learning for the fall. In a normal school year, our teachers spend a lot of their summer vacation planning and prepping for the upcoming school year. This year is very different. Our educators have been spending even more time learning new teaching styles, learning new online platforms. They're creating digital classrooms, and they're doing so much work, spending so much time during the summer break preparing for online learning. We understand that it must be more robust. It must be more equitable. We have to reach so many more of our students than we were able to in the spring. And so our educators are working on that. And it helps to know that we may have months to prepare. Teachers are natural planners. They want to know how long I'm prepping for. They do backwards planning. So it's helpful to hear from the district now that we may not go back for months. So at least teachers understand what they're preparing for. And again, to improve the online learning for this fall. I've also had a chance to speak with the current president of PTA, San Diego Council of PTAs, Mahogany Taylor. We've talked a lot about what parents need, and we came to the conclusion that communication is the #1 factor in the success of online learning. We have to make sure that if parents are having problems, if students are having questions or concerns, it's so important to reach out to your child's teacher. They want to hear from you. We want to know how things are going so that we can make modifications, alterations. Luckily, educators have some flexibility in how they're doing their online teaching. And so it's so important that educators hear from the parents and the students that they're teaching, so we can make sure that online learning is working for everyone. And finally, I just want to echo the comments from Dr. Terrace, Dr. Evans, Trustee Barrera. This is a community effort. We all have to work together to slow the spread of this virus. This cannot just be teachers. This cannot just be the district. This has to be every single person in San Diego County working hard, social distancing, wearing your mask, avoiding large gatherings, to slow the spread of this virus, or else we cannot safely open schools. So that's, that's my ask of everyone in San Diego County. I'll now turn it over to Derick Boerner, the past president of the San Diego Council of PTAs.
Thank you, Kisha, and thank you, Superintendent Marten, for including a parent and the PTA in today's announcement. I'll say from a parent's perspective, we obviously want our kids to return to in-person learning. We know that's the best way that our kids can learn. But we know that the most important thing is the health and safety of not only the children, but the teachers, the staff, and the community as a whole. We really applaud the district in using science to determine when that will happen and when in-person learning is going to start up again. And we know that there are going to be a lot of struggles using distance learning in the coming months. We really look forward to PTA, the district, parents, and families working together to promote the welfare of the children and youth in our home, in our schools, in our communities, to make these times as easy as we can. Most importantly for our students, we recognize that along with everyone in society right now, students are really struggling emotionally, and that is important for us to discuss with the district. We all have plenty of questions, not just about school, but life in general, but we really look forward to working with the district, other parent groups, families, teachers, SDEA, to answer some of these just piling questions that we all have, and how education is going to look come in just 3 weeks from today. So thank you very much, and I think I'll give it back to Superintendent Marten.
Thank you to everybody on the panel. You each hold a really important part of the work that we're doing to make some of the toughest decisions that have ever faced public education. As I've continued to say, this is the biggest adaptive challenge that any of us have ever experienced, and remaining true to our core and what we believe as a district around equity and excellence inside a global pandemic, when there are so many of things that are not within our control. What is within our control is to make good decisions and to make them together. And what you see here today is representatives of the kinds of people that we bring together when we make tough decisions like this. So I just think it's really important that we have the kinds of people together today and able to go forward in a way that's measured, and we allow science to lead the way. And I'm grateful to Chancellor Pradeep Khosla from UCSD that helped us put together that panel of experts, because it allowed us to have the kinds of people that we need to help us make sound decisions that are based on science. And I'll echo what Ms. Borden said about, we want nothing more than to be with our students. We understand the importance of in-person learning, and we want to make sure that it's safe to do so. So as a group together, we're going to continue to move forward in a safe manner and let science lead the way as we make decisions, and then plan the online learning experience to the greatest degree possible.
Okay, with that, we're going to go ahead and just open the room up for some questions. Questions will be limited to media. Our first question, it looks like, is from Adam Rakusen. I'm going to go ahead and unmute him. Okay, Adam, you should be able to talk now.
So thanks everybody for putting this on today. So we heard a lot of talk about the possibility that school could open months from now for in-person learning, not weeks. But I didn't hear a whole lot of specifics on what exactly it would take to get to that. Could you run through some of the specifics on what it is that you're exactly looking for to get kids back in the classroom?
Dr. Terrace, do you want to indicate what some of those indicators are?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I'll take that one. So the state has its indicators for this county to be off the monitoring list. And we are definitely going to go with those. However, our expert panel said, you know, those are not quite enough. We really maybe need even more parameters that also have to be achieved. And so we've adopted both the state and the county ones. And if you, on the report, there's actually a link a hyperlink to that document, but I will, quickly just run through it. The case rate in this county as of today is 110 per 100,000, and that is too high. That's a 14-day case accumulative rate. And it's got to be not only under 100, but it has to be consistently under 100 for 14 days. So it'll be like 17 days. If it started tomorrow that we were at 99, it would be a minimum of 17 days beyond that. But that would not be enough. We also would want to make sure that community outbreaks, so clusters of cases, were under 7. Right now we're at 24 because a lot of people are out there without masks and having backyard parties, etc. So that does affect who is in our school community. When there's community outbreaks, unless they're in, an old folks home, when those outbreaks occur, those people then come to school unknowingly asymptomatic but positive. So that is important. We would like to make sure that there is a testing positivity. In other words, for every test taken, what percentage is positive? And ours is under 8% in this state to be considered safe. And we're actually closer to 5% now. So that one is going okay. County ones that are not in the state ones also include things like, case investigations. If we do have someone who's positive in the school or in one of our family, in someone from the school community, a staff member or a student's home, who is known to be positive, is there someone asking questions, finding out who have you been near, where have you been? So that has to be where we have, over 70% of our cases are already begun that investigation within a day. Contact tracing, actually going out and looking and talking to those people who were considered to be close contacts. That takes time, that takes energy. And again, that we will go by how much contact tracing efficiency we have in this county. And that is making the first contact attempt for 70% or more of close contacts within 24 hours of identification. So those are the major ones. Other ones that are in there that look very good for our county already, but they're still in there, would be our hospital capacity, our hospitalization capacity, our ICU capacity, our ventilator capacity. Are there enough PPE supplies in hospitals in the community? And then there's other things that we never hear about on the radio, but is there an upward trajectory or a downward trajectory of where COVID is going, even where influenza-like illnesses are going? We want to see those go down. Homeless populations, they have to be sheltered. We've been doing a very good job in San Diego County for that, so I don't think that'll ever become an issue. But all those sorts of things, even if anyone alone is even on the borderline or whatever, it doesn't really matter because we have all the others also have to be in really good standing. So I think we're using some of the strictest criteria around, given that we're doing a compilation of all of those criteria.
Thank you, Dr. Terrace. And I'm going to add to that just to round out the question or the answer to the question. What Dr. Terrace just went over are the state and the county guidelines, and some of those sound very familiar. We've heard about those, but we've also added to the state and the county requirements our own requirements, our school facility requirements. And the point that we want to make is that this comes down to what we do inside schools and what happens outside schools. And the county and the state guidance matter, but also the strictest guidance matters, but also what we're doing inside school. So we have to understand schools will be ready to reopen when the conditions outside and the community allow us to do so. But that's why all the preparations that we're doing are also essential. We have to hold ourselves to the highest possible standard for reopening safely, and Dr. Terrace just went over what those are. Some of those look really good in San Diego, some we have work to do, but we have to hold that standard high because the health and safety matters for our whole community. So we can't do it alone. As Kisha said, she made her plea to the community, follow the guidelines, wear your masks, distance, all of those things. But that's also why we've purchased more than $11 million on personal protective equipment. And the districts received 200,000 masks in child and adult sizes from the state, along with 14,000 bottles of hand sanitizer. So we'll follow the strict guidelines that we've learned through the scientists and what's out there, but also continue when it's safe to do so with all the preparations for in-person learning as soon as we're able to do that.
Okay, so our next question comes from Johan with KPBS. I'm gonna go and unmute you. Okay.
Great.
Perfect.
Thank you. Yeah, so I'm wondering about testing and how much testing the school district will provide to students and staff. Who's going to be tested and how often?
I'll start with that one, but anyone else, please jump in. To me, it is critical that when someone in the school community has symptoms, that a test is available for them. And I personally do not recommend that this school district or any other school district that I'm involved with actually have their own testing program and run it from there. Testing is a very complex thing, and healthcare providers that have systems and computers and reporting systems for negatives, reporting systems for positives, they have a difficult enough time. And I don't think as an educational institution that should be our responsibility. Our responsibility, and I'm speaking with my school district hat now, is to make sure that we know that members of this school community have that test available when they have symptoms. And to me, that is a very critical thing to open. And it would be very, very good if that test didn't take 4 or 5 days to get the appointment and then another 4 or 5 days to get the result, because then you've lost the contact tracing and everything that we can do to make that classroom or that school administrative office safe. So we want not only testing, but testing that is pretty efficient in how it's run. And I am hoping that, you know, through one's own health insurance or through partnerships with the district, partnerships with UCSD or Rady Children's or the county health department or community clinics or whomever, that using their efficient systems that have been up for years and years and years on testing, and their nurses that can quickly gown and glove and get all their PPE in place and have the time to do this, will be the ones that actually do the testing. There could be other forms of testing that I think are kind of experimental but promising. That's pooled testing of people that are asymptomatic, or pooled testing of wastewater looking for the virus. The benefits of testing asymptomatic people in these ways look promising, but they're still in a research mode. And I would love to partner with an academic institution or a company that is developing these tests to look into that. There's some value in that. But right now, those opportunities are not available. And I don't think they are also critical, given everything else we've talked about, our safeguards. And but what is critical and was not yet available is we do want to make sure that everyone can get a test fairly early and the result fairly early, so that we can get the investigation going and make the school safe within a day or so.
Okay, with that, we have our next question coming in from Hunter Sowards with KUSI. So I'm going to go ahead and allow her to talk.
Hi there. Hopefully I did this correctly. Thanks again so much for doing this and for taking questions. Mine really has to do with, we mentioned there's a problem with federal funding and that not being there at this time. My question is, if we get to the point within the community where we're checking all of those boxes, we're meeting all of the criteria as far as our case rates and things like that, what happens if that money is still not there? Will that hold us back from moving forward?
I could
Go
jump
ahead,
in
go ahead,
first.
Richard.
Yeah, I'm sorry, John. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, we have been prepared. You know, we were prepared to begin the year with all of the mitigation factors in place at all of our schools, but only for a period of time, because the amount of money that is available through the state budget would not last the whole year. So now we're in a situation where, you know, again, Hunter, in answer to your question, if all the factors were in place, we met all these, you know, community health standards, we were ready to move forward with our phased reopening, we've got some of the money to get us started. The superintendent talked about the fact that we've already ordered $11 million of personal protective equipment. But the money to sustain throughout the year, if you just think about, you know, for instance, the healthcare professionals, you know, school nurses, school health techs that need to be on campus, the ability to keep students in small groups, the ability to work on our ventilation systems, the ability to put hand washing, you know, stations in all of our classrooms, all of those issues, that money starts to become prohibitive if we don't get relief from the federal government. And so, yes, the federal government actually coming through with money to reopen schools is critical. And what we also have to remember is we're talking about this coming school year, the 2020-21 school year, but in a few months, in January, Governor Newsom will come out with his proposed budget for the following year, for the 21-22 school year. And we're seeing the devastation in the economy in California and the likely reduction in state revenues. Again, this is not just a one-year solution that we need from the federal government. We need the federal government to realize that the economic downturn will affect state budgets and therefore school budgets for several years. And in order to mitigate cuts, in addition to providing the extra resources that we need, not just to complete this year, but to go forward over the next year, we do need to see that federal stimulus, and it has to be significant, not just for schools in San Diego, but around the country.
Yeah, let me just add to, let me just add to what Richard Barrera was saying was we're not going to wait for the federal government to reopen our schools, but it is going to make the difference in terms of reaching the finish line. Because last June, when we were talking about looking at our options for reopening the schools when the virus conditions were better, we said, well, our students have been out of school too long. It looks like we have enough money to get started. At that time, with just a rough calculation, a few months, at most a semester of the year, that we could keep our schools open with all of these measures. So at this point, you know, we're not going to say we wouldn't reopen the schools. We don't have money. It will be a period of time before we can reopen the schools, and then depending where we are in the year, we could see how far that would go. I think this is all going to come to a head. I mean, people are going to realize, I mean, right now in the summer, the politicians are bargaining and negotiating and so forth. They're going to see a massive problem in the fall with the schools in terms of having enough money to operate. And there's going to have to be some sort of a emergency measure for stimulus money. Our position on the board has always been, we're going to do the best we can with whatever money we have. But we're also realistic that if there's not enough money to provide for all these costs, that we're going to be limited in what we can do.
Okay, with that, we're going to go to the next reporter, who is Will Hunsbury with Voice of San Diego. I'm going to go ahead and unmute you, Will.
Hi there, everyone. Good afternoon. So, educators and Superintendent Marten and board members, you guys have often talked to us about how school is really one of the safest places in the world for some students. Homeless students, foster students, they might be among some of those groups. And so I wonder if there is any plan to bring the most vulnerable student groups back to physical campus where they will have access to that safety that you guys have talked to us about.
Yeah, I mentioned that earlier on, that I think the homeless students is a great example of where, it's just, it's difficult for everybody in terms of distance learning. Across the spectrum, there are lots of limitations, but certainly when you take the example of homeless students, we are going to need to find a way to provide in-person services for those students. So our first job was to get set up for the online learning, which we've been doing all summer and we'll be starting on the first week of school. And our next task is to figure out how we can provide those in-person services for those exact students that you're talking about. So there will be more to come on that as we sort through and figure out ways to actually do it.
Okay, so our next reporter is with Univision. We have Saddam. Saddam, I'm going to allow you to talk. If you would like to recite your question in Spanish, we do have a Spanish interpreter on here to read that back in English. So I'm going to go ahead and allow you to talk.
Thank you for that, Jamie. I was I know there is only one question per reporter, but I actually have a few questions that I was hoping to be answering in Spanish. I know there is a translator, but we were hoping to have the response in Spanish as well. I know Dr. John Lee Evans speaks Spanish. I don't know if I can say until the end to do a couple of questions.
Okay, go ahead and ask one of your questions right now.
Okay, so one of my questions that this could be answering in Spanish is what can schools or parents could do or should do right away to prepare for in-person classes? And we've talked with several parents, and they still fear that we are not prepared to go back to classes in person.
Is the question?
Okay, I think the best person to answer that would be the superintendent. I go ahead and answer it in English. They will translate it.
Thank you. I want to just clarify, is the question from parents about what can they do to prepare to come back for in-person classes?
Well, it's just in general, if there's anything that parents or schools, could start doing right away to prepare for in-person classes.
Well, let me repeat what Kisha Borden just said earlier around the community responsibility to follow all the public health guidance around wearing masks, staying socially distanced, don't get into large gatherings, stay in your family unit, because all of the metrics that Dr. Howard Terrace laid out that came from our UCSD experts showed that there are certain metrics that we need to meet to be able, certain conditions that will allow us to have a full reopening. So that's all community things that we can do to allow us to get these conditions right when it comes to the public health metrics that we're all monitoring very carefully. And then besides that, what we're doing to prepare the schools for physical reopening are the kinds of things I talked about in terms of procuring enough personal protective equipment, what kinds of spaces need to be happening, what kinds of outdoor learning spaces can we put together. And those are not necessarily things parents do, but that's what our staff will be doing, is already doing, following the health guidance. We learned a lot from the UCSD professors around what would be the best things to do for in-person learning to put all those mitigations in place when it is safe to open. And I'll always just talk straight to our parents. And I know we have a translator, but I worked in City Heights for 10 years, and understanding, our families want to feel that sense of connection and connecting with their teachers, giving us feedback about what's working. We want to customize and we want to make things work for you and for your family. So if there are resources that you don't have or connectivity issues that you don't have, it's a very much individualized, customized, personalized approach about what is your current family situation and how can we support you in that. We have district counselors and district nurses and teachers, and the full spectrum of San Diego Unified staff is ready here to support you. And we will always say when school is not in session right now, as we're getting ready to begin online learning, we always say reading is important, keeping your reading skills up, keeping your writing skills up. Independent reading, independent writing is always important in the summer months. And so families should continue to do that to the greatest degree possible. And if they need help and they need support, connect with us and we'll be there for that. I think Kisha can also talk about what teachers are doing to prepare for their students, because I know you're hearing from a lot of teachers. Kisha, and maybe you want to add on to that.
I don't know if the Spanish interpreter wanted to share anything first.
He's doing it simultaneously.
It's simultaneous.
Okay, so definitely parents should maybe, I think to get ready for online learning, I am very happy to see that the district is going to be providing trainings and support for parents to get ready for online learning. I think also talking to your children about mask wearing for when they get into the classroom is going to be very important. Maybe practicing wearing your mask around the house so that it's not such a big change for them once we go back to school. And really talking about why we're wearing masks. It's really to protect each other and make sure your classmates are safe and you are safe. As a 20-year educator of elementary school kids, I know sometimes their sense of humor is not always conducive to safety measures. Really explaining to your children the importance of these safety measures that we're trying to put into place, even once we get back into school, is very important. So just know that educators are working hard to get ready. I know the district is going to work to support students and families in getting ready for online learning. And again, if you have questions or need help, reach out to your child's teacher once school does start, whether it's in person or online.
And I would just add, as a psychologist, I mean, in terms of parents and students, is especially with younger children, but you should spend time asking them what they understand about what is going on. Don't make any assumptions, because people hear, kids hear things and they can interpret it one way or another. One girl was told that if she was in a high risk group because she had a particular illness, and so she became concerned that if she did almost anything at all, that she could die. I mean, that was sort of an extreme reaction. Father was just shocked that she thought that. But with all of this stuff, I mean, the TV going constantly, the news, being away from school, all this kind of stuff, the first way to start with the conversation for parents with their kids is to ask them what they understand, so you can actually clarify what's accurate and what's inaccurate.
And I don't know if Derick, a parent, actually wants to say advice for parents straight from a parent. Not that we're not all parents, but.
Sure, I'll weigh in and say I think it's just like Dr. Evans and Kisha said, talk to your kids. I know as a parent of two daughters, I'm worried about, how they feel and their anxiety and their stress level. And if we can talk about it and help get some of those things out and answer some questions, that'll help. I would also say once school does go back, be in communication with your teachers and your principals. Stay involved. Having the information is half the battle. So if you can stay involved and make sure you know what's going on for your children, you can help them even more. Don't assume that your kids are going to bring everything home to you. They don't when we're in-person learning. They're certainly not going to when we're in a virtual learning environment. So stay as involved as you can as a family.
Okay, with that, I think we're going to go ahead and just wrap up the press conference. Like I said, we are only going to be doing one question per reporter. For those reporters that have follow-up questions, you're more than welcome to reach out to Mike Murad. He's our communication specialist. He is on our media advisory. It looks like I just got a hand raised from Shannon Handy, who has not asked her question yet, from Channel 8. So I will go ahead and allow you to talk as well. Okay, Shannon, go ahead.
Hi, Jamie. I just wanted to know if we have access to the panel's report. If so, where we can find the link.
Yes, I was actually going to be announcing that before you raise your hand, but basically we have it up on our San Diego Unified.org website. If you click on our banner, we have a full news release as well as the report, and our communications office will be also issuing a news release to all media shortly. So you will have that in your inbox, hopefully in the next hour or so.
Thank you so much.
Okay, so it looks like we're still getting hand raising for follow-up questions. Like I said, no follow-up questions on here. We're going to go ahead and wrap it up. Visit our website and reach out to Mike Murad if you have any additional questions. Thank you.